Hi there, I'm talking to Lucia Knight this afternoon. Lucia is a midlife career consultant and her business is Midlife Unstuck. And I absolutely love the name. I think it's so appropriate and so pointed. How did you come about the name, Lucia?
Well, do you know what? I was talking to people about that recently this week, and I thought for ages about it, but I got loads of negative feedback. So this was 5 and a bit years ago, loads of negative feedback, because at that time, when you used the word midlife,
yes,
it was always followed by crisis.
Crisis, yeah.
And there was a negative view of that, you know, Ferrari buying or motorcycling or divorce or just horrible things. And loads of my friends said, "Are you sure?" And I just knew I wanted to have a very narrow target market. I don't know anything about 20-year-olds, and I don't know an awful lot about 60-year-olds. But in between, I know this world, and I just call it midlife. And I think over the last 2 years, every newspaper uses the word midlife and talks about, you know, fitness and change and all sorts of things. And it's really positive now. It's just a definer of our age. That's all it is.
Yes, that transition. Yeah.
Yes.
And apart from being a midlife career consultant, you're also an author. You've appeared on a number of podcasts, and you've got a nice blog on your website, which I read a number of articles on. So it's great. So how did you find yourself getting into this particular area?
I think maybe like some of your audience, I hit my 40s in corporate life. I spent 20 years in recruitment and in headhunting. And the last 5 of those years, things just didn't feel quite right. They weren't really wrong, but I became more and more stuck, not knowing where to go, what to do, what's the next step, but absolutely knowing that I did not want to spend the next 2 decades in the same spots that I spent the last 2 decades. So I started a whole transition process, and it was frankly very hard. Not many coaches around at that time, not many people were doing what I was doing. I didn't know anybody who had changed career and done so happily. None.
Was there a trigger for that, Lucia? Was there a trigger point, or was it just an evolving process for you?
Do you know what? There was a trigger point, and it was a Tuesday night in October. I think I was about 42 or 43 when I had done a 12-hour day, big commute, handed my kids over to a nanny, came back home, and basically put the kids to bed before my husband came home. He also did a huge commute. And I ended up shouting and screaming at my children, "Go get to bed, Mummy's got to do more work." What the hell? And actually it wasn't Mummy's dying to do this conversation. It was like, Mummy's got to do this really heavy work. And I think as parents, I started to think I want to bring up my daughters in a world where fun is too hard, but work is satisfying. It's something we want to do and want to do for a long time, as opposed to, I've got to work. And that was a trigger point for me. I didn't want to be that kind of mum. I didn't want to be that kind of worker bee. And I wanted to show my children that work can be something that can be super, super satisfying.
Yes. And you have a psychology background as well, don't you?
I didn't have a psychology background until midlife.
Okay, yes.
And then one of the ways that I transitioned was to do a master's in psychology.
Wonderful.
Nearly killed me. Absolutely nearly killed me. Very hard.
Would have been hard work.
Going back to uni after 25 years, you know, global libraries.
Absolutely.
I mean, the crazy stuff. So that's even crazy. Just transitioning into, and you know, working alongside 25-year-olds was an eye-opener. A lot more energy than we do. But it was one of the things that I did that helped me transition.
Yes.
But I don't often recommend that as a first go-to for my clients. You know, that's a bit of a baptism by fire.
So tell me a little bit about your coaching practice, your consulting practice.
So I saw it as a headhunter. I met, 5 companies a week. I interviewed 20-ish people a week, mostly in their 40s, quite senior people, all professionals. And none of them could see what I could see. So that unique vision that I had, sort of an insight into all of these companies over years, meant that I could see this weird pattern. So I would always be talking to a CEO or MD or FD, and all of them would be around my age or a bit older. And then when I looked elsewhere in the companies, very few 50-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I worked in one of the UK's biggest, top FTSE 250 businesses. There were 2 people who were 50 and over. So I could see this pattern that something was happening to 50-year-olds in the world, 50-plus-year-olds, that they were disappearing from the corporate world.
Yes.
Mostly quietly, silently.
It's interesting.
Just disappearing off, either through redundancy, horrible exits, surprise exits, or planned exits, but mostly unplanned. So that's what brought me to this. I knew that if I could find, and the people that this was happening to, they were surprised by it. I wasn't, because I could see it coming, but they were. So I felt if I could create an opportunity to catch those people earlier and to train them, so give them some transition muscles, maybe, to train them how to design their career differently, I could catch them before they get toasted by corporates, but I could also elongate their career as long as they want it to be. So by changing the design of their
trying
career.
to get involved with people before that transition.
Before they hit the wall, before they were made redundant, before they were fired, before they were sidelined into a specialist cul-de-sac. So trying to catch people before they hit the wall, so that they had the freedom of and the brain space to be able to create something different. And the energy, once you get to the end of a line in a company, people are usually slightly hurt. Sometimes broken, sometimes exhausted, sometimes stressed. And I knew that I needed to get people earlier. So that's why I started my blog. And that's got loads of traction, because there aren't many articles written for specifically that world.
It's a great niche. Absolutely. So what is it about the midlife male experience, I guess, in the workplace that you encounter time and time again? What's happening to men at that time?
I'll give you some trends, but it's different for every single person. Okay, so as they get later into their 40s and early 50s, something happens. They either hit a ceiling, so a ceiling of their skill set, a ceiling where they're working constantly on their weaknesses, which is utterly exhausting, or they are working outside of their strengths, so there's stress there, and they might, so for instance, people management isn't natural for all of us. It just isn't, and even though I probably worked for 20 years on that, people management was very exhausting. And I find males in particular, they have this upward trajectory of success in their mind. And, that impacts status, identity, self-esteem, etc., if they choose not to continue up. So there's a dilemma there. Do I continue battling outside of my strengths, or do I look at what I do brilliantly and reform it? Other things, simply the age profile thins out in all corporations. And so the older they get, the more they face ageism. And ageism is everywhere. No one talks about it, and you cannot talk about it in your company because some sort of shining light comes on you and you exit quite quickly after that. So those sort of things.
You mentioned identity a moment ago. Is there a particular link between men and identity and what work does for men?
Again, I'm only going to speak about this generation because that's what I know. So men have had 2 different work identities positioned for them. So their parents, their dad. Okay, so let's take one individual. His dad worked probably all his life and then stopped. So that's one working identity. Our generation, men cannot do that. No one. For a range of reasons, work is indelibly printed in our identity. So in the houses that we live in, and our peer group, who we go swimming with, all of that, we do talk about work. When we introduce ourselves, go, "Hi, I'm Jim. I'm
this is what I
whatever
do.
you are, an architect. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And it's, we have to change that. But today, that is how it is. You go, this is my name. You might say, I'm a dad of 2 kids.
Yep.
And then you would say what I do, or reverse those. Hi, I'm Jim. I'm an architect and I'm a dad of 2. So it's so closely linked to us. It's very hard to separate it. So when we change our work, we also change our identity. The identity around being a successful man, being a successful dad, is very closely linked to being successful in your work. And society perceives successful as this upward movement. Society perceives successful as money. Society perceives successful as things. So all of those are challenged when you change career. And I'm not just talking big career change. It can be tweaks, but they're all challenged all of the time.
And oftentimes they're reasons why men don't change careers or don't transition. They just put up with what they don't like or don't find satisfying.
You are so spot on there. So, and that is an okay plan for a while. But bear in mind, most of us will be working for another decade, if not much more. And you can put up with things that don't fill you up for some time. The maximum I've seen someone in my work hold that, I don't enjoy this, but I'm going to do it for the kids. I'm going to do it for the wife, the family. The most I've seen that is close to 10 years. But that is it depends how bad it is, but that is a slow decline. Less energy, less enthusiasm for life. If you do that for 5 years, you're not filling yourself up, which means you're emptying yourself. It
overflows to your life with your family and all sorts of other areas of your life.
Absolutely. And that's why, most people I know work at least 8 hours, 5 days a week. Life is too short to spend 60% of our waking hours doing something that reduces us. And it might just be reduces us by 10%. Do that for 5 years, that's 50%. And I just think the opportunity cost, you could be doing something better. You could be, you could make tiny changes to your work, which means you work in your strengths more than your weaknesses and do exactly the same job and be more fulfilled.
So the advice that you're giving midlife men prior to that transition is obviously different advice than you're giving someone who's going through that period of time. How does that differ?
So in that early stage thought process, there's room for creativity, but I have this very simple formula, and it's super, super simple, complex to do, but simple. And it basically, imagine a little Venn diagram. The first one is use your superpowers daily. And by superpowers, I mean uber strengths, the things that fill you up, make you feel good. You do easily, you do better than most, faster than most, lighter than most, and you have more energy at the end when you use them than you do at the beginning. So that's the first part of the formula. You must use those. The second part is find a problem for others that's interesting to you. And the third is just get paid for it. Really, really simple stuff. But those people in the early stage that we're talking about, that first is figure out which bits of your role you really enjoy. And then design more of those into tomorrow. It's as simple as that. So then you fill yourself up with energy. You're figuring out what you're great at so that you're practicing the design, and that gives you energy to do bigger changes if you need to.
Okay. So do men in this period of time generally look to transition to something totally different, or do they look to make small changes?
In truth, most people have this idea of escape. Some sort of dreamy escape onto something really brilliant, far, far away, like a Caribbean island. Or, one of the stories in my book, the first story is someone who was in defense, who changed to become a gin maker. Now that's kind of the poster child for career change. But most midlife men cannot do a giant change because they have responsibilities.
Yes.
So they come to me thinking, I want to do a big change and I need to get a big plan B. But actually we end up tweaking. And then sometimes, quite often, most often, they don't need to do that big change. They might want to do something on the side or something fun, or they figure out that they offer their skills for free to, I don't know, a local business or something. But mostly they don't make a big change.
Yes.
Or they can't in the first year or two, but they may come back and then think, okay, now I'm ready. I've got the savings. I know what I want to do. I've done some research on an idea, but most don't do it in the first couple of years.
So the men that you see, are there generally some trigger points there, or again, is there an evolving process whereby they come to a realization that they need to find something else or need to explore those superpowers, as you said earlier?
There is, when they come to me, there is usually they've hit a tipping point. And that tipping point can be something negative has happened. So they've seen their best friend be made redundant. They've their parents have become ill. They've had a friend who's become sick. They've had a personal health scare and they go, hang on a minute.
Yes.
Life is more important than this. I need to do something about it. Or they've had this idea or this itch in their head for years and they go, I just need to investigate it a bit more. I don't need to do anything drastic. So that tipping point is either I have to get away from this or I'm driven towards something. But it all seems to align with a moment when time becomes an incredibly valuable resource to them.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Just talk a little bit about your business. So you run some coaching programs, obviously consulting programs. Tell me a little bit about the sort of programs that you offer. So
I run one-to-one programs around those three circles I explained to you. One's called Discover Your Superpowers, one's called Redesigning Your Future, and the other is How Do You Commercialize This? So 3 separate programs. But I think the most accessible one for most people who are in that early stage is a career overhaul and redesign program, which I've called weirdly the Fierce Emporium. And basically, my idea is that careers have to be fierce at our age. And fierce is running in a direction, getting up each day going, I've got to do something important today.
Yes.
Intentional, exactly your word, consciously planned, not the stopping point, but the movement point. Yeah. So I think it's got to involve your superpowers every day. It's got to avoid your kryptonite. Yeah.
Yes.
So the opposite, obviously, of superpowers. And it's got to feel good. And on that program, it's an online program, can be done at home. Wonderful. I also do a group program. So all of your sort of readership and audience living in Australia could do that at home. And I combine it with one-to-one coaching and a group live program 3 times a year.
Oh, that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about the book you wrote, Exchange. How did that come about?
So way back when, at the beginning of the story, so I was, 42, 43, I just finished the master's and I was going, oh my God, I'm no further on than I was before. I've spent a lot of money and this has been very stressful. I still don't know anybody who's changed career. So then I had to go out and I gave myself this ridiculous goal, which I do a lot. I said, I'm going to find 100 people who've changed career. Because if I do this business, I have to prove to people that it's possible. And it took me ages to find the first one, friends of friends of friends. And then the second one. By the time I got to 10, I could see some patterns and it got me really excited. My scientific brain got very excited. And then I went on every social media. I asked everybody I met, do you know someone who's changed career beyond 40 and is happier because of it? Anyway, I got to 100. But when I was about, I don't know, maybe 30-ish, I talked to a publisher about it. 2 people said, talk to this guy. He'd be really interested. And half an hour later, I had a publishing deal.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
And worked with them. They coached me. I'd never written before. And I'd written lots on the blog, but I'd never written a book before. And they coached me through it. And they were absolutely wonderful. So
fantastic.
That book is a synopsis. So it's 19 of the 100 stories of normal professionals, 50% of them men. who change career and are happier because of it. But it's also, the magic in it is that there's 8 secrets that every single one of those 100 have or did.
Wonderful.
So there's some real value in understanding that. That is the key to designing future work, those 8 secrets.
Okay.
And that's...
So how does someone find your book?
You just go on my website, midlifeunstuck.com. You can get it on Amazon, but the easiest place to find it or to get directed to is there. Yep.
Okay. Lucia, we'll finish up there. Just one, if you were to give one piece of advice to someone going through that period, what would that be?
Figure out what you're great at and do more of it tomorrow.
Wonderful. Lucia, thank you so much for your time. Really, really valuable. Certainly an issue that's relevant for so many midlife men. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
I love your work, Steve. Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.